This is a production of WGBH2 Boston.
Tonight on Greater Boston, the Brussels attacks. Leaders around the world vow action.
We will do whatever is necessary to support our friend and ally Belgium in bringing to justice those who are responsible. This is yet another reminder that the world must unite.
Reporter Jeb Sharp and Jutta Clausen, author of The Islamic Challenge, Politics and Religion in Western Europe, have been there and will try to explain why Brussels is becoming the terror capital of Europe. Later, State Senator Jason Lewis headed up the Legislative Study Committee on marijuana legalization. He'll tell me why he's just saying no. Plus, two guests on the joys of live bacteria and the perils of soap. One of them hasn't taken a shower in 13 years. And finally, the crisis GE's CEO needs to address when he visits Boston later this week. This is what it looked like in Brussels this morning. Crowds fleeing the departure hall of the capital city's airport after two explosions went off, killing at least 10 people and wounding 100 more around 8 this morning, local time. An hour later, a bomb went off at the metro station near the European Union headquarters, killing at least 20 more and wounding another 130. ISIS has since claimed responsibility. Raids were carried out around Belgium throughout the day, while in the U.S., major cities, including ours, Boston, are tightening security, particularly in mass transit areas, though Massachusetts State Police say there's no intelligence that suggests an attack here is planned. Joining me now are Jeb Sharp. Jeb's a reporter of the PRI's The World, located here at GBH, recently back from Belgium. Jeb, good to see you. Jutta Clausen, who teaches international cooperation at Brandeis, heads the Center for European Studies at Harvard, is the founder of the Western Jihadism Project. It's a group that collects data on Islamic extremist groups in the West. Good to see you again, too. Brussels has essentially become a launching pad for terrorism in Europe, the launching pad. Madrid, Paris, obviously its own locales in its city. How did this happen? Why did this happen?
Well, it's funny. I'd like to hear what Jutta has to say about that. But
well, you will.
Has become. Yeah. But it goes back a long, long time. And you mentioned Madrid, but it goes even further back. And I spoke to a writer recently who grew up in one of these segregated immigrant, mostly Muslim neighborhoods. Like
Molenbeek, that we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, and he remembers in the 80s recruitment going on at the mosques for to join the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets.
So she wants to hear how it started. You tell us both. How did it start? Why did this come to pass?
Well, what we're dealing with now is an extremely successful recruitment drive on the part of the Islamic State among young Westerners who have been gang members. Bob Reinrath, who is the director of Europol, said in early March that 80% of the travelers to the Islamic State, they estimate, have a background in gangs.
But just staying with Belgium for a second, my understanding is the largest per capita number of fighters who end up in Syria is coming from Belgium, of all the European states. Why are they the outlier here?
Well, so the gangs do have a role to play. Belgium has a huge problem with gangs in that particular neighborhood. So we have this convergence between gangs and jihadists. And these are very dangerous people because they are used to carrying out violence. And yes, it is because there has been underground hubs. There's been a group that was known as Sharia for Belgium that has been recruiting there now since 2010. And they have been very active, and the Belgian police was not very successful in cracking down on them.
I'm going to talk about the Belgian police in a second, but it is so much the norm, and maybe that's too strong a word, that I know you've talked about their support groups amongst parents of kids who have become jihadis.
Yes,
is that
exactly
so?
What we're just talking about, people going. There are now parents who have to band together because they are grieving so many young people. I met people from a support group that has 48 families as members. And that's really poignant when you're right up against the human piece of it.
Do they blame themselves? I mean, I know they're not a monolith.
I think they blame themselves, and I think society really blames them. There's a huge amount of shame that comes
in
with
that larger
territory.
community.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
You both mentioned Molenbeek. Let's talk about it for a minute. And people have heard of it. Most of us hadn't before. This is where obviously Abdeslam, amongst others, was captured 4 days ago. What's life like there? What's life like for them? I want to talk about the police and the government in a minute. What's life like for the people who live there?
Well, it's like Brooklyn, old housing stock that has been taken over by immigrants and by hipsters. I'm happy to go there. It's not a bad place to go.
So why is it the breeding ground for so much horror around the world if it's like Brooklyn?
There is what we call complex contagion between the extremists who have been recruiting there for years and the gangs. And that's when things go bad. That's when you have multiple sources that reinforce each other in these types of recruitment processes. Many of these people, we know the Paris attackers who came out of Molenbeek all had a background in gangs, and they all went to the Islamic State.
But you know what's amazing to me, Jeb, is when you hear about this from outside, unlike the two of you who've been there and know it firsthand, law enforcement knows this. Government officials know this. The sense I get from afar is that at least pieces of Molenbeek are there's no government, there's no law enforcement, there's the no snitching thing that we all learned about here in Boston. That's a fair description of what it's like, right? It's sort of there
right,
and they pray that it's contained, and often it's not,
And even as they try to get better at getting a handle on the program, austerity measures have cut back on police forces. And Matthew Levitt, a former U.S. official and terrorism expert, has been talking about this a lot. They're down 185 police officers in Molenbeek alone, and he's been stressing that. That's a big challenge.
And getting to this no snitching, they do protect each other, I assume. When we heard that Abdus-Salam was, a quarter of a mile, 10 minutes away from his own home and his mother's, and the only reason they ended up getting him, a primary reason, is because a woman who was with him ordered so many pizzas that authorities said, well, that's odd. There must be a lot of people in that. How can he be hiding in plain sight and they not get it?
Well, it's because it's embedded in a community that's already very anti-state and very anti-government.
Is that what explains when I've learned that they didn't allow, I don't know if this has been changed at the time of the Paris attacks, which is when I first met you, when you called into our radio show, they do not allow nighttime raids, so they're basically saying to tourists or tourists in waiting, don't worry, when the sun goes down until it comes up, you're safe, just worry starting tomorrow morning? I mean, is that what explains that?
But one more point on the snitching, can I just interrupt? Sometimes it is a very human thing, too. This is, as you say, an anti-state, in a way, place, a place that feels beleaguered and separate and discriminated against, too. You can flip it that way. And someone said to me, imagine being a mother and getting scared that your kid's radicalizing. Is the first thing you're going to do go to the police? In a logical sense, yes, please, given what's happening. But in a kind of human sense, is that what people do? Someone raised that with me when I was pushing them on it.
But it seems to me, getting back to the police, that you mentioned the resource deprivation there, but it seems to go to one extreme or the other. Either no night police raids and that sort of thing, or the flip side is after the carnage has happened, they essentially shut down their city. I assume that'll end at some point. And then we'll go through the same cycle all over again. What's it like for a Muslim kid starting today or after the Paris attacks? What's it like for a Muslim kid in Brussels or somewhere in Belgium today?
Well, everywhere.
A peaceful Muslim kid.
Well, everywhere. I mean, so it's a very complex picture because there are a lot of Muslims working in the police force. A lot of Muslims.
I hear it's overwhelmingly white, which is part of the problem.
In the local, but so the issue is that Belgium is a highly layered federalized state, and the local police in Molenbeek is not really in charge of this situation anymore. This is now a federal and a French issue. The French police has been cooperating and inserted its forces. They've been part of the raids. But, for instance, one of the men who was shot last week, we now learn, is actually an Algerian from Sweden who in 2014 went to the Islamic State and came back to Brussels. So it's not all about Molenbeek. It's not all about Brussels. It's actually about Europe. It's about these fluid, open borders, and there's no real coordination within Europe about how to attack and deal with this problem.
Speaking about open borders, we only have 30 seconds left, Jeb. I assume this deals another blow to a continent that has dealt far more hospitably with refugees than has the United States. This is going to create even a higher and higher obstacle, right?
I think that's right. They're having so much trouble figuring it out, and this just adds the perception that they can't deal with terrorism as well as refugees.
Jeb, thank you for your analysis.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for
it's
the
good
chat.
to see you yet
Good
again.
to see you.
Appreciate it. Later, my two guests will try to explain to me the trouble with soap, their better idea, and why one of them last showered at a time when the Sox hadn't won a World Series for more than 80 years. Plus, the head of GE is coming to town on Thursday, and why many in Western Massachusetts won't be celebrating. But first, to the issue of legalizing recreational marijuana in Massachusetts, likely coming before voters this November. The head of the state's Special Legislative Committee, Senator Jason Lewis, was appointed to head up a study, and for months he was the only member of the committee. But now, after a slew of research and a trip to Colorado with him and some of his colleagues, he's speaking out against the plan. Senator Lewis, it's good to see you again.
Good to be with you, Jim.
So can you give me the Cliff Notes version of the primary reasons why you decided after the trip and the research to vote no or urge people to vote no?
Sure. Well, I went into this when the Senate President asked me to study this with an open mind, and I stayed neutral over the last year when I was heading up the Special Senate Committee. But I am now taking a position publicly in opposition to the ballot question. And that's simply because I think that this is not the right time for Massachusetts to go down this road.
What does that mean?
And second, I think that the ballot question lays out the wrong approach, which is a commercial, profit-driven approach, and I don't think that's the right approach.
Why is it not the right time?
It's not the right time because I'd like to see a number of things happen before we go down the road.
Like what?
So first, we need a strong public health campaign to reverse the perception among young people that marijuana is harmless, which it's not when your brain is still developing. Second,
but just stay on that for a minute. This thing wouldn't be implemented, my understanding, should it pass, until January of 2018. That would give you 14 months after people vote for it to do it. Why isn't that adequate time to educate the public?
That might be when retail stores start opening, but the ballot question within a month would allow legal possession and use of marijuana. So right
possession
away,
is legal now. At least it's decriminalized,
well, it's decriminalized
now,
yeah. But that would send a very strong message to young people that this is okay, it's safe to use, and that we do believe that is likely to increase consumption.
What else in terms of
second is we really need to figure out how to deal with driving under the influence of marijuana. We don't have procedures and protocols. Law enforcement doesn't know how to deal with it. We need to treat it like we do drunk driving, and we need to figure that out first. Third,
by the way, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in February last year said, well, driving drunk dramatically increased. Driving drunk, the risk of getting into an accident. There was no evidence that smoking marijuana alone increased the risk in a statistically significant way. They're the experts.
There have been several different studies, and is often the case with marijuana. There are sometimes conflicting studies, but the preponderance of the evidence that we reviewed suggested that it does overall increase the risk of accidents. Third is we really need to get a handle on baseline marijuana usage in Massachusetts. What are the true public health statistics, the public safety, and economic impacts? This was an issue we heard in Colorado and Washington because they didn't have good baseline data. They haven't really been able to understand the trends in usage and how to drive policy from that.
One of the other reasons that at least was stated in the Boston Globe about it's not quite the time is the delay in implementing medical marijuana. Let's get that right. And when I read that, my response was, you're kidding, right? Because the government has so brutally botched a law that the public passed. The public should be told, hey, you're going to have to wait to do what you may want to do because we are inept. I mean, that is essentially the statement, is it not?
It's a fair criticism, and it is my next reason that I would give. It is a fair criticism. We have made a lot of mistakes along the way, but the reality is there are many, many people in the state who could use medical marijuana to treat their condition, and they don't have convenient, affordable access to it. We have about 23,000 people that are certified in Massachusetts. In Colorado, a smaller state, they have over 100,000. So I do think we should focus on getting that right. If you move to recreational now, it will take a lot of the focus away from medical and getting that up and running.
Senator, you know the history. I'm not sure everybody does at home. They probably do. There have been marijuana-related questions on the ballot every 4 years. 2008, decriminalization. It passed by almost a 2-to-1 margin, 63-34. 2012, medical marijuana, almost 2-to-1, 63-37. And by the way, almost like now, whole political and most of the law enforcement infrastructure urge a no vote. The public says, thank you very much, we're voting yes. How'd you vote in 2008?
I did vote no on both the previous ballot questions.
So do you think that it's fair to criticize your impartiality? I can understand, by the way, the decriminalization thing, but if a doctor can prescribe an opioid, even under the new law that you guys passed, your position was a doctor shouldn't be able to prescribe marijuana to a patient whom he thinks or she thinks needs it? Isn't that a bit extreme?
Well, I understand that, and I'm certainly fully committed to implementing it now.
I understand
But
that.
at the time, my view was this is an illegal drug under federal law. It's a Schedule I drug, which means it has no medical value under federal law. And why would we treat this substance different from every other substance that we do, which goes through an FDA-approved process, and we make sure it's safe. We know what the dosage is. We know, what conditions.
But you think
it
you can be
treats.
impartial despite those prior votes?
I do,
Just
because
say no,
well,
which is what you're proposing.
Because I went into this at that point when we started this project a year ago. We already had decriminalization. We already had medical. That was a fact. And to me, and I should have pointed this out earlier, my opposition to the ballot question is not because I'm fundamentally opposed to legalization.
You think the time is not right, you said.
I think the time's not right. And secondly, I think the approach of a profit-driven commercial market for an addiction industry is not the best approach. And we've seen that with tobacco.
One other thing, is every member of your committee so far, have they come out against this? Is that unanimous?
Almost everyone. I think there are a few who haven't publicly expressed a position.
Let me put up the latest poll that I am aware of in Massachusetts. UMass Amherst, 53-40. Beyond, again, I raised the issue of your impartiality a minute ago, and you responded to it. Is it not fair to say the legislature is totally out of touch with where the people are? 52-40 support. And frankly, I was going to say your boss, the leader of the Senate, this is Stan Rosenberg, who appears, he's told us, pretty much close to voting yes, doesn't hurt somebody else. He hasn't said it, but pretty much indicated that's the direction he's going. Virtually nobody of the 200 members has had the courage to say it, which leads me to believe it's more about politics in most cases, maybe not yours, than it is unless the public is totally clueless. How do you explain this huge chasm between them and you?
I think it's too soon to really tell. The debate is really just getting underway now, and I think that this is very different from decriminalization or medical.
This is legalization.
This is legalization.
Poll. That's what that poll is.
I understand, but I think a lot of people haven't yet focused on exactly what that means, and this is much more complicated than a yes or no question. There are major, major policy issues, which we laid out in our report that we published 2 weeks ago.
How do people get that report, by the way?
It's online.
Where will they go?
masslegislature.gov, and then the reports, or they just Google Special Senate Report on Marijuana.
I was sure you wouldn't know I was wrong. Senator Lewis, it's good to see you.
I hope they'll
be
take
seeing
a look
lot
at it
in the months ahead. I hope you'll take a look at it too. Senator, thank you so much for your time. Next up, question for you. So when's the last time you had a good hot shower? For one of my next two guests, the answer is 13 years and no baths either. Joining me now are Jasmina Aganovich. She's the president of Mother Dirt, a biome-friendly line of skin products. She showers. Nice to see you, Jasmina. Again, David Whitlock is the founding scientist of AO Biome, Mother Dirt's parent company, based in Cambridge. He doesn't. Nice to see you both. Central premise of this whole thing is that washing using traditional soaps, etc., is bad for you. Why?
We've been too clean as a society. We've always believed that bacteria on the skin is bad, but we're learning, for example, like with probiotics internally, that we actually need bacteria in order to be healthy.
And do these things, like, they add bacteria, or they just preserve the good live bacteria that's on your body?
Both. But one of the ones we're most excited about is returning the bacteria back to the skin. We have a bacteria that once actually existed on our skin, but we've wiped it out in the last 50 or 75 years by being too clean.
But speaking of history for a second, we were less healthy ages ago when we bathed less. So doesn't that run totally counter to your central premise?
Depends on what sorts of diseases you're talking about. What we know is that no incidence of inflammatory skin diseases existed even as recently as the last 100 to 150 years. If you look at the percentages of things like acne and eczema that exist in the developed world versus the undeveloped world, or even historically, the numbers have changed pretty dramatically.
Okay, David, it's your turn. You're the person they really want to hear from. I know you want to answer that, but we'll get to that in a minute. You've taken this to a whole new level. I know you're sick of this question.
Right.
When was the last time you took a shower? You don't even know, right?
I don't. Yeah.
Roughly, how long is it?
It's been at least 12, 13
12, 13,
years.
whatever.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that what motivated you is you're out on a date or something.
Yes.
And the woman you're with says something about rolling around in the mud, or
well,
what exactly happened?
I was dating this woman, a fifth grade school teacher, and she asked me this question, why did her horse roll in the dirt in March?
Oh.
First I said, well, get rid of insects. And he said, no, that's before insects come out. And so eventually I decided, well, it was to get the right kind of bacteria, right kind of bacteria on its skin so that sweat over the summer wouldn't putrefy. And so trying to impress her, I went to the library and it became too important to not pursue, and so.
How'd that work out?
Actually, for her, it worked out well. I mean, we never became an item.
It was meant to be.
It was never meant to be.
But she got the answer to the horse deal.
Yeah.
How'd you get introduced to this whole concept? I know you shower and all that kind of thing, which is not contra to any of this. How'd you get introduced to this notion that live bacteria are keeping them there pretty critical to your skin's health and all that sort of thing?
Sure. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, but my career has been in consumer products where we've believed that bacteria on the skin is a bad thing. So you can imagine when I heard about this company, I found it fascinating. I met the team, saw the science, and was finding it really compelling. So I knew I needed to come on board. I fundamentally believe that it is one of the most dramatic shifts in personal care that could hugely make a difference in personal health.
And give me 2 or 3 examples of all these things. Assuming you use these things, these sprays, mists, whatever they are, what are the primary benefits people will get? And by the way, you do it as a supplement to what he doesn't do. But what are the primary benefits, Jasmine?
Most of our users find that they can cut down on other products. So deodorant is a big one. About 60% of our users are able to stop using deodorant, which is kind of a crazy idea for most people. For others, it's about cutting down on moisturizer, cutting down on makeup. And the benefits of that, other than shorter routines, is also less chemicals. Your skin is much more balanced and able to take care of itself.
Now, I assume you hang out with him a little bit. I mean, at work and obviously doing things.
Yeah.
What's the question that most people have about him? We don't know what it is. What is it? What is it? I mean, just ask him. You ask him.
People have walked into the office wanting to know if David smells.
Okay, and I want you to know, before you answer the question, because I wasn't going to trust your answer because I knew what it would be, when you were on Boston Public Radio, both of you, about a month ago, this is what I did. That is me sniffing. I'm embarrassed to say. I am sniffing I believe it is the left armpit of David. And I have to say, you smell, I wouldn't say great, but you smell totally fine.
Yeah.
Why do you smell totally? Why don't you smell horrible?
I mean, normal, fresh human sweat is sterile and is odorless, and it's only bacteria that convert sweat and exfoliated skin into things that smell bad, and it's the bad bacteria that do that, not the good bacteria.
So do you think you'll expire someday, never having taken a shower again?
Well, I have no plans to bathe.
Unless, of course, like we talked about on the show, if there was like a truck that
gave him a
drove
bigger
by and
dumps a bucket of crap on me, I will, of course, bathe. But
No.
No,
you're doing pretty well, from what I understand. You just won some award in western part of the country. I mean this seriously. I'm sure the product. I'm sure. I've heard a lot of good things about this. Were it not for him, would you be doing as well? I mean, that's the story that leads people like me into this. Is he not a key to your success?
Of course. There's the
I don't mean
quote,
the scientific work. I mean the fact that the guy doesn't take a bath.
Absolutely. I think all progress relies on the unreasonable man, the people that view the world differently. So David has been central to the company's ethos and our mission.
You ever smelled him?
Of course. Yeah.
And you had the same results I did.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fabulous. Jasmine, it's great to see you. Good luck. This is all this. How do they find? What's the website for this?
Motherdirt.com, and if they want to learn about our clinical research, it's aobiome.com.
Wonderful. David, it's great to see you again. You smell fabulous. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Time now for Mars Globe Tonight. Your first look at Wednesday morning's Boston Globe with city editor Stephen Smith. Hey there, Steve. What's on page 1?
Hi, Jim. Could the school year in Boston start before Labor Day, and could the February vacation become but a distant memory if School Superintendent Tommy Chang has a way those two hallowed scheduling traditions would go the way of the 85-cent tea fare? Here's the thinking behind Chang's initiative. If classes were to begin in August, that would make it significantly less likely that students would be stranded in school until late June if there's a torrent of snow days, which can extend the school year. And by eliminating February vacation week, that time would be grafted onto the winter holiday break. That's a reflection of the growing bolus of international schools, students in Boston schools, students who want to go overseas to celebrate Christmas and New Year's.
Does Superintendent Chang have unilateral authority to do this, or does he have to get the agreement of the union, some other groups, or can he do it on his own?
He cannot. He needs the endorsement of the school committee, and already school committee members are hearing opposition from some parents.
What else are you featuring tomorrow in the paper?
Hey, big spender, have you played this new video slot machine game unveiled by Plainridge Park Casino? If you have, and you're suddenly feeling lucky, you may, Jim, want to know this. Your chances of winning with the digital version are substantially greater than if you do the real thing at Plainridge Park. Addiction specialists say that could be misleading, giving players a false sense of confidence. Plainridge Park says, hey, we just want to introduce potential gamblers to the excitement of wagering.
Don't players always have a false sense of confidence? Isn't that the whole deal?
And that's the story of our lives, isn't it?
Steve Smith, it's good to see you. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow. So GE's CEO is coming to Boston on Thursday to speak to fellow business executives. In addition to addressing why he decided to move GE's headquarters to eastern Massachusetts, Jeffrey Immelt should explain why he's been unable to strike a deal to clean up the Housatonic River in western Mass, the waterway GE polluted for half a century. From the 1930s through the 70s, GE's plant in Pittsfield dumped PCBs, likely carcinogenic, into the river. The company's in a dispute with the Environmental Protection Agency over hundreds of millions of dollars and millions of cubic yards of sludge. The EPA wants a certain level of removal of toxic chemicals. Local activists want even more. GE wants to remove less. The EPA wants GE to comply with state law, which requires the sludge be taken out of Massachusetts. GE thinks it should be exempt from state hazardous waste regulations. The EPA says GE opposes the plan for one reason, quote, to reduce its costs in cleaning up the PCBs. GE admits, among other criteria, it wants a cost-effective plan. Shortly after the original GE announcement, I asked one of the two major brokers of the deal, the mayor and, in this case, Governor Baker, if the cleanup had been part of negotiations to bring the company here. This is what the governor said.
The larger question associated with their dispute and their engagement with the EPA around the cleanup at the Housatonic is a separate issue and should be dealt with separately.
I'm hoping Charlie Baker believes the time for dealing with it separately is now. Baker and Boston's Mayor Walsh trumpeted how good GE's coming to our city is for Massachusetts. Now it's time to ensure that Immelt's firm's arrival is good for all of Massachusetts. What do you think? Email us, tweet us. Please share your thoughts. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. Hillary Clinton's candidacy. Our all-woman caucus will discuss whether her gender plays a role, for good or bad, on the campaign trail. And as Anonymous declares all-out war on Donald Trump, a former member of the hacktivist group joins us to weigh in. That and more tomorrow at 7. One more thing before we go, a message from the people of Brussels who've been taking to the streets all day long since the attacks, writing messages of solidarity, peace, and of hope.